After 10 years of silence, a CEO hears his lost love's trembling voice on a call and abandons everything to return to her. Welcome, radiant souls. Whether you are discovering this circle anew or finding your way back to familiar warmth, you are held here with love and light. Share your essence, your name, or simply your energy, and become part of this sacred journey of healing and connection. Every story shared here is woven with divine purpose. Pause for a moment, breathe deeply, and let the gentle whispers of your soul guide you home. San Francisco's autumn air buzzed with the electric energy of innovation and possibility, a fitting backdrop for a story that would span decades. The city's familiar fog had just begun its daily retreat, revealing a jewel-toned sky that promised endless possibilities. It was on such a morning that fate orchestrated its masterpiece, bringing together two souls who would forever change each other's lives. Ethan Drake, the 32-year-old wunderkind of Silicon Valley's startup scene, strode purposefully down Market Street, his mind racing with the pitch he would soon deliver to potential investors. His latest venture, an AI-driven platform that promised to revolutionize cloud computing, had already garnered significant attention from tech giants. The Wall Street Journal had recently dubbed him Tech's Rising Phoenix, a title that both pleased and pressured him. His tailored navy suit and purposeful stride marked him as another ambitious tech executive. But there was something different about Ethan. Behind his confident exterior and steel-grey eyes lay an artist's soul, one that he'd buried beneath spreadsheets and coding sessions. His fingers, now tapping rapid-fire emails on his phone, had once played piano with the same intensity. Music, like many of his passions, had taken a back seat to his relentless drive for success. Just ahead, the Blue Bottle coffee shop's door swung open, releasing the rich aroma of freshly ground beans into the morning air. From within emerged Olivia Lily Bennett, her arms precariously balancing a tower of portfolios and her signature oversized coffee. Her wild copper curls caught the sunlight like flames, and her paint-stained fingers betrayed her true calling despite her attempt at business casual attire. At 30, Lily had already made a name for herself in the city's art scene, not just for her stunning mixed-media installations, but for her innovative art therapy programs in underprivileged communities. Her latest exhibition, Digital Hearts in Analog Spaces, had earned critical acclaim for its raw exploration of human connection in an increasingly disconnected world. Yet success hadn't hardened her. If anything, it had made her more determined to bring beauty to overlooked corners of life. The universe, with its infinite wisdom and occasional mischievous streak, chose that precise moment to orchestrate their collision. Ethan, engrossed in his phone's screen, failed to notice Lily's slight stumble on the uneven sidewalk. In a cascade of papers, coffee, and startled exclamations, their worlds literally crashed together. Time seemed to slow as Lily's portfolios exploded around them, her artwork taking flight in the morning breeze like a flock of escaped birds. Pages of her life's work danced through the air, sketches of children laughing in therapy sessions, photographs of community murals, and proposals for future projects, all scattered across Market Street's unforgiving concrete. "Oh God, I'm so sorry!" Ethan's reflexes kicked in as he reached out to steady her, his hand catching her elbow just as she began to lose balance. Their eyes met in that moment of chaos, and something electric passed between them. Lily's eyes, a striking amber flecked with gold, widened in recognition, not of who he was, but of something deeper, as if her soul had been waiting to find his. Instead of the anger he expected, a laugh bubbled up from her throat, genuine and warm. "Well, that's one way to make an entrance," she quipped, her smile transforming her entire face. The morning sun caught the dusting of freckles across her nose, and Ethan found himself momentarily speechless. a rare occurrence for someone known for his persuasive pitches. They scrambled to gather her scattered work, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same paper. Each touch sent tiny sparks through their fingers, a phenomenon both tried to attribute to static electricity but knew was something more. Passers-by stepped around them, some stopping to help, creating a small moment of community in the usually rushed morning crowd. "I'm Ethan," he offered, handing her a slightly coffee-stained sketch of a child's smile. "And I believe I owe you a coffee, at minimum." His usual confident tone carried an unusual note of uncertainty, as if he knew this moment was pivotal and didn't want to misstep. "Lily," she responded, accepting both the drawing and, after a moment's consideration, his implicit invitation. "Though I should warn you, my coffee order is basically a novel." Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she added, "And I might even tell you what it is if you help me salvage the rest of my portfolio before it decorates the entire financial district." As they gathered the last of her work, Ethan noticed the depth and emotion in her pieces, the way she captured human connection in an increasingly digital world. It resonated deeply with his own hidden concerns about technology's impact on genuine human interaction. Here was someone who understood both the beauty and the cost of progress. Against his better judgment and several calendar notifications demanding his attention, Ethan found himself holding the door to Blue Bottle open for Lily. His investors could wait 10 minutes. Something told him this moment, this meeting, mattered more than any pitch or deal. Inside the coffee shop, the morning rush had subsided, leaving a quiet space for new beginnings. Lily's novel of a coffee order turned out to be a lavender oat milk latte with an extra shot and a dash of honey, a combination that made Ethan raise an eyebrow and Lily defend with passionate detail the importance of properly balanced flavors in life. Their conversation flowed as naturally as the coffee they shared, jumping from art to technology, from community impact to personal dreams. Ethan found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone about his secret love of classical music and his childhood dream of being a composer. Lily spoke about her vision of using art to heal trauma and build bridges between communities. Neither noticed the minutes turning into hours, their phones forgotten in their pockets. The morning sun had climbed high into the sky by the time they reluctantly acknowledged the day's demands. But before they parted, they exchanged numbers, not with the usual professional networking pretense, but with the honest acknowledgement that something remarkable had just begun. As Lily gathered her now organized portfolio, she paused and pulled out a small sketch she had made on a napkin while they talked. A simple but striking drawing of 2 coffee cups, their steam intertwining in the shape of a double helix. "A reminder," she said, handing it to Ethan, "that the best things in life happen when we're not looking at our phones." Ethan carefully tucked the napkin into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. As they stepped back onto Market Street, now bustling with lunchtime energy, both knew their lives had irreversibly changed. The city's familiar soundtrack seemed to have gained a new note, a harmony that hadn't existed before their collision. Later that evening, as Ethan finally sat down to prepare for the investor meeting he'd postponed, he found himself unable to focus on profit margins and market projections. Instead, he kept pulling out the napkin sketch, his fingers tracing the intertwined steam trails. For the first time in years, he felt the stirring of his old musical inspiration, a melody forming in his mind that spoke of chance meetings and new beginnings. Across the city, in her studio apartment filled with half-finished canvases and the smell of oil paints, Lily found herself starting a new piece. Her hands moved almost of their own accord, creating a complex pattern of interconnected circuits and organic forms. In the center, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, she painted 2 small figures reaching across the digital divide to touch hands. The stars had aligned, the cosmic dance had begun, and neither Ethan nor Lily could have predicted how their chance encounter would set in motion a story that would span years, cross continents, break hearts, and ultimately prove that true love, like art and innovation, knows no bounds. Their journey was just beginning, and San Francisco's fog rolled in as if to wrap their budding romance in a protective embrace, keeping their secret just a little longer from the rest of the world. This was no ordinary meet-cute. This was the beginning of an epic love story that would challenge them both to grow, to risk, to fall, and ultimately to discover that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't in technology or art, but in the human heart's capacity to love and evolve. The morning's collision had set them on a collision course with destiny, and neither would ever be the same. Chapter 2. Dancing with Destiny. Their story unfolded like a masterpiece painted in time, each day adding new colors to their canvas of shared moments. The weeks following their coffee shop collision transformed San Francisco into their personal playground, where every street corner held the promise of another adventure. Ethan discovered that dating Lily meant embracing the unexpected. Their first official date set the tone for everything that would follow. He had planned an elegant dinner at Gary Danko, where he could impress her with fine wines and sophisticated conversation. Instead, a spontaneous downpour forced them to duck into a tiny Vietnamese restaurant in the Richmond district. There, sitting on plastic chairs under flickering fluorescent lights, sharing steaming bowls of pho su and telling stories between sips, they found a kind of magic that no Michelin-starred restaurant could have provided. "You know," Lily said, expertly wielding her chopsticks, "I think the universe is trying to teach you something about perfect imperfection." Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she watched him struggle with a particularly elusive noodle. The tech mogul who could command boardrooms was being thoroughly defeated by Vietnamese cuisine, and she found it utterly charming. Ethan laughed, abandoning pretense and dignity in favor of genuine joy. "The universe seems to have sent me quite the teacher," he replied, his gaze softening as he watched her tuck a wayward copper curl behind her ear. The fluorescent lights transformed her hair into a halo of flames, and he wondered how he'd ever found beauty in symmetry and order when such glorious chaos existed. Their dates became a study in contrasts. One evening might find them at a black-tie gala where Ethan's presence was expected, Lily turning heads in a vintage emerald dress she'd found in a thrift store and modified herself. The next afternoon might see them cross-legged on the floor of her art studio, Ethan's bespoke suit jacket, discarded as he learned to work with clay, his hands covered in earth as Lily taught him to feel rather than think. She brought color to his monochromatic world. Under her influence, his minimalist penthouse gradually transformed. A vibrant abstract painting she created during one of their conversations found its way above his sleek fireplace. Handmade ceramics, their imperfections telling stories of laughter and learning, replaced his perfectly matched tableware. Even his coding space gained character. She hung tiny prisms in his home office window, filling his workday with dancing rainbows. In turn, Ethan showed her how to find poetry in precision. He introduced her to the beauty of algorithms, explaining how the golden ratio appeared in nature and art. During late-night conversations, he shared his vision of technology as a force for connection rather than isolation. Lily found herself incorporating circuit board patterns into her paintings, creating a new style that critics would later call digital impressionism. Their professional lives began to intertwine in unexpected ways. Lily's art therapy program caught the attention of tech investors after Ethan mentioned it at a conference. Suddenly, she had funding to expand her work to more communities. Meanwhile, her influence on Ethan became evident in Cloud Vision's evolving design philosophy. Their user interfaces grew more intuitive, more human. One memorable evening, Ethan surprised her with a visit to the California Academy of Sciences during a private event. As they stood in the planetarium, surrounded by stars, he explained how each constellation told a story. "But none quite as remarkable as ours," he added softly, pulling her close as the artificial universe spun around them. They discovered each other's quirks and embraced them wholeheartedly. Lily learned that Ethan stress-cleaned when facing major business decisions, and she started leaving him small messes to organize when he needed to think. He discovered her habit of talking to her plants and began leaving them anonymous, encouraging notes, written from the perspective of a supportive succulent. Their friends watched in amazement as two seemingly opposite souls created their own unique harmony. At dinner parties, Lily would finish Ethan's sentences, not with the words he would have chosen, but with ones that captured his meaning even better. He developed an uncanny ability to know exactly when she needed rescue from networking events, appearing at her side with an escape plan just as her social battery ran low. Rain became their personal symbol after that first date. They made a tradition of walking in it, no matter how inconvenient the timing. During one such walk, sheltering under a shared umbrella in the Presidio, Lily confessed, "I used to think I knew what art was, but loving you, it's like creating and being part of a masterpiece at the same time." Ethan stopped walking, turned to her and smiled. "That's exactly how coding feels now. Every line I write, I'm thinking about how it connects to something larger, something more meaningful." He brushed a raindrop from her cheek. "You've taught me that innovation isn't just about disruption. It's about enhancement, about making space for magic in the machinery." Their relationship wasn't without its challenges. Ethan's demanding schedule sometimes clashed with Lily's free-spirited approach to time. She occasionally felt overwhelmed by the high-powered tech world she now had to navigate. He struggled to let go of control, to embrace the beautiful uncertainty she brought to his life. But they faced each challenge with the same creativity they brought to their work, finding unique solutions that made their bond stronger. 6 months into their relationship, during a rare sunny winter day, they decided to play tourists in their own city. They rode cable cars, ate clam chowder from sourdough bowls at Fisherman's Wharf, and made wishes at the Palace of Fine Arts. As the sun began to set, Ethan suggested visiting Coit Tower. At the top, overlooking the city that had brought them together, Lily was photographing the golden light playing across the bay when she turned to find Ethan on one knee. The ring he held wasn't a traditional diamond solitaire, it was a custom piece he'd designed with a local artist, featuring a Moebius strip of rose gold set with tiny sapphires and pearls. "Lily Bennett," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "you crashed into my life and rearranged everything I thought I knew about love, success, and happiness. Every day with you is an adventure I never want to end. Will you marry me?" She laughed through her tears, pulling him up to kiss him before even saying yes. A small crowd of tourists had gathered, cheering as she finally managed to speak the word. Someone started playing "San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair" on a guitar, and they danced there at the top of the tower, the whole city spread out below them like a glittering promise. Later that night, curled together on the rooftop garden she'd helped him create, they talked about their future. Their dreams had evolved, grown more intertwined. They envisioned a life that would balance ambition with art, success with social impact, structure with spontaneity. "We should get married here," Lily mused, gesturing at the garden, "under the stars, surrounded by growing things." She was already sketching ideas on a napkin, her artistic mind transforming the space into something magical. Ethan watched her create, marveling at how naturally she turned thoughts into visual poetry. "Whatever you imagine, we'll make it real," he promised. "That's what we do best together, make dreams tangible." The night wrapped around them like a velvet cloak, the city lights below mirroring the stars above. Their love story was evolving, moving from serendipitous beginning to chosen partnership. Neither could have predicted where that coffee shop collision would lead, but both knew with absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. As San Francisco's familiar fog began rolling in, adding mystery to the skyline, Ethan and Lily remained on their rooftop, planning their future in whispers and sketches. They were building something unique, a love that celebrated both structure and chaos, both planning and spontaneity, both roots and wings. The tech world would soon be abuzz with news of the engagement between Silicon Valley's rising star and the innovative art therapist who was revolutionizing community programs. But for now, in their rooftop garden, they were simply Ethan and Lily, two souls who had found in each other the perfect balance of logic and magic, of dreams and reality, of strength and vulnerability. Their whirlwind romance had become a deliberate choice, a conscious weaving together of two distinct lives into something greater than either could have imagined alone. As they finally headed inside, leaving their empty wine glasses to collect fog, both felt the profound rightness of their path forward. The next chapter of their story was beginning, and like everything they did together, it would be both carefully planned and wonderfully unexpected. Chapter 3. Promises Under Starlight. Their wedding day dawned with San Francisco's characteristic fog, but by afternoon, the sky had cleared to reveal a perfect September evening. The rooftop garden of Ethan's building, now their shared home, had been transformed into an enchanted realm that perfectly embodied their unique love story. Lily had spent months working with local artists and botanists to create something extraordinary. The entire rooftop bloomed with a carefully curated mixture of living plants and artistic installations. Wisteria and fairy lights draped overhead, creating a canopy of purple blooms and twinkling stars. Interactive light sculptures, designed by a collaboration between Cloud Vision's engineers and Lily's artist friends, responded to movement and sound, turning the space into a living, breathing artwork. The ceremony space itself was a masterpiece of integration. The altar was a striking sculptural piece, two intertwined trees crafted from recycled computer parts and copper wire, their branches supporting delicate glass flowers that caught the light. Living vines wound through the metallic structure, blurring the line between nature and technology, art and innovation, just as Ethan and Lily's love had erased the boundaries between their different worlds. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, their intimate gathering of 150 guests took their places. The crowd was as diverse as their lives. Tech entrepreneurs in bespoke suits sat beside artists in handcrafted clothing. Venture capitalists chatted with community activists, and coding prodigies found common ground with art students. The traditional wedding march was replaced by an original composition, a piece that Ethan had secretly written over the past months, rediscovering his love for music under Lily's influence. As the first notes filled the air, played by a string quartet, the garden's light sculptures pulsed in harmony, creating a symphony of sound and light. Lily appeared at the rooftop entrance, and time seemed to stop. Her dress was a collaborative piece of art, designed by her and created by a team of fashion students she mentored. The silk base was hand-painted with swirling patterns that echoed circuit board designs, while delicate embroidery traced constellations across the fabric. As she moved, tiny lights sewn into the dress twinkled like stars, powered by innovative, flexible circuits that Ethan's team had developed specially for the occasion. Ethan, waiting at the altar in a midnight blue suit, accented with hand-painted silk details that matched Lily's dress, felt his heart skip several beats. Tears welled in his eyes as he watched her approach, her copper curls crowned with a wreath of tiny white flowers and crystalline structures that caught the light. She carried a bouquet of blue orchids, interspersed with delicate paper flowers crafted from the pages of old programming books and art theory texts. Their vows were as unique as their relationship. Ethan spoke of algorithms and chaos theory, of how finding Lily had introduced a beautiful unpredictability into his carefully ordered world. "You are the variable I never knew my equation needed," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me that the most elegant solutions often come from embracing uncertainty." Lily's vows were a piece of performance art in themselves. She had created a series of small paintings, revealing each one as she spoke of their journey together. The final piece was blank, and she took out a brush. "Our love is a perpetual act of creation," she declared, making a single brushstroke across the canvas. "Each day, we choose to add new colors, new patterns, new possibilities. This painting will never be finished, just as our story will always be unfolding." The exchange of rings was equally meaningful. Rather than traditional bands, they had worked with a tech-savvy jeweler to create rings that incorporated both their passions. The bands were made of a special alloy that changed color slightly with body temperature, with tiny embedded crystals that caught and reflected light in complex patterns. Inside each ring was engraved a line of code that, when run, produced an infinity symbol made of their initials. As the officiant pronounced them married, the garden erupted in a carefully choreographed display of light and music. The interactive sculptures pulsed with joy, sending waves of color rippling through the space. Thousands of tiny LED fireflies, programmed by Ethan's team, took flight from hidden spots throughout the garden, swirling around the newlyweds in a dance of technology and magic. The reception that followed was a celebration of their combined creativity. Instead of a traditional dinner, food stations offered fusion cuisines that represented their diverse interests and backgrounds. A molecular gastronomy station, staffed by a renowned chef, served dishes that looked like works of art, while a comfort food corner offered elevated versions of their favorite late-night coding and painting snacks. Their first dance was set to a remix that blended classical music with electronic elements, another symbol of their harmonious fusion of different worlds. As they moved together under the starlit canopy, the garden's lights dimmed to create the illusion of dancing among the stars. Guests would later swear they couldn't tell where the real stars ended and the artificial ones began. The party continued late into the night, with impromptu collaborations between musician guests and the garden's interactive light installations, creating an ever-evolving atmosphere. Tech entrepreneurs found themselves sketching ideas on cocktail napkins with artists, while venture capitalists discussed community outreach with Lily's non-profit colleagues. Their wedding was accomplishing what they'd always done best, bringing different worlds together in beautiful harmony. As midnight approached, Ethan and Lily slipped away from the celebration to a quiet corner of the garden they'd reserved just for themselves. A small seating area surrounded by bioluminescent plants offered a peaceful retreat. Here, they took a moment to absorb the magnitude of the day and their commitment to each other. "Look what we created," Lily whispered, gesturing to the joyful celebration below them. The garden was alive with laughter, music, and the kind of spontaneous connections they'd always hoped to inspire. "It's more beautiful than anything I could have painted." Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of flowers in her hair. "And this is just the beginning," he promised. "Every day with you is a new masterpiece waiting to happen." He took out a small package from his pocket, one final surprise. Inside was a delicate origami crane made from the napkin on which she'd drawn their coffee cups the day they met. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she carefully unfolded it. Inside, Ethan had written their entire story so far in his precise handwriting, ending with blank space and the words, "to be continued." The gesture captured everything about their relationship, the preservation of meaningful moments combined with the promise of future adventures. They stayed in their quiet corner until the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky, talking about their dreams for the future. They planned to revolutionize the intersection of technology and art therapy, to create spaces where innovation and creativity could flourish together, to build a life that would inspire others to break down the barriers between different worlds. As the sun rose over San Francisco Bay, painting the city in shades of promise, Ethan and Lily Drake stood in their rooftop garden, surrounded by the lingering magic of their celebration. The fog was rolling in again, wrapping around the buildings below like a soft blanket, but up here, everything was crystal clear. They had created something unique, a marriage of art and technology, of structure and spontaneity, of two distinct individuals who made each other better. Their honeymoon would take them around the world, from digital art installations in Tokyo to ancient temples in Kyoto, from the galleries of Paris to the innovation hubs of Berlin. But for now, they simply held each other, watching their city wake up, knowing that their greatest adventure was just beginning. The garden's interactive lights dimmed gradually with the rising sun, but one installation remained illuminated, the metallic trees at the altar, their glass flowers still catching the light. Like Ethan and Lily's love, it stood as a testament to the beautiful things that can happen when different worlds collide, when technology meets art, when structure embraces chaos, and when two people brave enough to cross boundaries find each other and decide to build something extraordinary together. Chapter 4. Paradise and Pressure. The first year of marriage unfolded like a dream painted in vibrant hues of possibility. Fresh from their worldwide honeymoon, a 3-month odyssey that had taken them from Japanese digital art museums to Italian Renaissance galleries, Ethan and Lily Drake threw themselves into creating their shared vision with characteristic passion. Their penthouse became a living laboratory of their combined philosophies. The space evolved constantly, with Lily's artistic installations responding to data from Ethan's latest tech projects. One wall displayed a dynamic mural that shifted based on CloudVision's global user activity, turning cold data into warm artistry. Their home office featured dual workspaces that mirrored their personalities, Ethan's clean lines and holographic displays complementing Lily's organized chaos of canvases and digital tablets. Winter in San Francisco brought with it their first major collaborative project. CloudVision had acquired an abandoned warehouse in the Dogpatch neighborhood, and together they planned to transform it into something unprecedented, a hybrid space that would serve as both a tech incubator and community arts center. The project, dubbed The Confluence, became their shared obsession. "Imagine it," Lily would say during their late-night planning sessions, her hands moving expressively as she sketched concepts. Artists and coders working side by side, each learning from the other's process. Children from underserved communities learning to code through art, and tech professionals rediscovering their creativity. Ethan matched her enthusiasm with practical innovation. "We'll incorporate adaptive architecture," he'd explain, pulling up holographic models. Walls that can transform from gallery space to coding stations, interactive installations that teach programming concepts through movement and color. It's going to revolutionize both fields. Their individual careers soared as well. CloudVision's latest platform, inspired by Lily's approaches to visual learning, attracted major attention from both tech giants and educational institutions. Meanwhile, Lily's art therapy program expanded internationally, with new centers opening in London and Singapore. Their success fed their shared dreams, providing resources for ever more ambitious projects. But as spring bloomed across the city, subtle tensions began to emerge like hairline cracks in a masterpiece. The demands of their growing empires started to pull them in different directions. Board meetings competed with gallery openings. International video calls interrupted quiet moments. Their once synchronized rhythms began to falter. One rainy Tuesday evening, Lily sat alone at their dining table, the elegant meal she'd prepared growing cold. Ethan had promised to be home by 7. They were supposed to discuss the community outreach programs for the confluence. But a crisis with CloudVision's Asian servers had erupted, and now it was nearly 9. When he finally rushed in, still on a call with his Tokyo team, Lily was in her studio, aggressively attacking a canvas with dark blues and stormy greys. The painting would later sell for a small fortune, critics praising its raw emotion and exploration of digital isolation. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said after ending his call, standing in the studio doorway. The authentication protocols failed, and millions of users were locked out of their accounts. "I couldn't step away." Lily continued painting, her strokes precise despite her frustration. "I understand," she said, and she did. That was part of what made it so difficult. "But this is the 3rd time this week, Ethan. The confluence opens in 4 months, and we haven't finalized the community programs." He moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders, feeling the tension there. "I know. Look, what if we block out all of tomorrow afternoon? No calls, no meetings. We can go to the site, walk the space, plan everything properly." She leaned back against him, letting out a long breath. "Promise. Promise." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with oil paints. But promises, they were learning, were increasingly difficult to keep in their high-powered lives. The next day, as they stood in the vast space of the confluence, Ethan's phone buzzed with urgent messages from potential investors. Lily watched as he grew increasingly distracted, his responses to her ideas becoming shorter, his attention divided. "Just take the call," she finally said, her voice tight with resignation. "We both know you won't be able to focus until you do." He hesitated, torn between his wife's disappointed eyes and the persistent vibration of his phone. "It's the Singapore Investment Group. Their funding could help us expand the confluence concept globally." "There will always be another important call, another crucial meeting." Lily's words carried no anger, only a sad understanding that made Ethan's heart ache. "Go. I'll continue the walkthrough with the contractors." That evening, they sat on their rooftop garden, the space that had witnessed their vows now serving as neutral ground for an overdue conversation. The fog wrapped around nearby buildings like a protective cocoon, giving them a sense of privacy in the heart of the city. "We're losing something," Lily said softly, swirling the wine in her glass. "All these grand plans, these amazing projects, they're everything we dreamed of, but somewhere along the way we stopped creating just for us." Ethan took her free hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring, the one that changed colors with body temperature. It was cooler than usual. "I know," he admitted. "I look at my calendar sometimes and realize I've scheduled every minute except the ones that matter most." They sat in thoughtful silence, watching the fog drift between buildings. Finally, Lily spoke again. "Do you remember our first date? When the rain forced us into that tiny faux place?" A smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "Best ruined plans of my life." "Maybe we need more ruined plans," she suggested. "More moments where we let go of our schedules and just be." That night marked a turning point, or at least it should have. They made new promises to each other. They would have weekly date nights, no phones allowed. They would spend one weekend a month at a cabin in Mendocino that Lily found, where the internet was spotty and the air smelled of pine needles instead of city smoke. For a while, they managed to maintain this delicate balance. Date nights became sacred space, filled with rediscovered intimacy and creativity. Lily taught Ethan to throw pottery in her studio, laughing as he created charmingly lopsided bowls. He showed her how to code simple games, delighting in her unique approach to problem-solving. The Confluence project continued to evolve, becoming more ambitious with each passing week. They hired a talented team of artists, engineers, and educators, all drawn to their vision of breaking down barriers between technology and creativity. The space began to take shape, with interactive installations being tested and community programs being developed. But the world had taken notice of their success, and with attention came escalating demands. CloudVision's board pushed for aggressive expansion into new markets. Art institutions worldwide sought Lily's innovative therapy programs. Their phones buzzed constantly with opportunities too good to pass up. One particularly beautiful Sunday morning in late summer, they were having breakfast on their balcony when both their phones chimed simultaneously. Ethan had been offered a chance to speak at a major tech conference in Tokyo. Lily had been invited to establish a groundbreaking art therapy program in London. Both opportunities were scheduled for the same week, the week of the Confluence's grand opening. They looked at each other across the table, morning light catching the worry in their eyes. The choice they faced was more than just a scheduling conflict. It was a glimpse of the challenges that lay ahead. Could their love survive their success? Would their shared dreams pull them together or push them apart? As if sensing the weight of the moment, a familiar San Francisco fog began rolling in, wrapping around their building like a question mark. They had built something beautiful together, but beauty, they were learning, required constant care and attention. Their love story had entered a new chapter, one where the greatest threats came not from external forces, but from their own dreams and ambitions. The fog thickened, obscuring the city below until their balcony felt like an island in the clouds. Lily reached across the table, taking Ethan's hand. His wedding ring was warm against her palm, its embedded crystals catching the diffused sunlight. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, assuming, of course, they could find the time to do so. That evening, as Lily painted in her studio and Ethan reviewed codes for the Confluence's interactive installations, a shared thought echoed in their minds. Success was meaningless without someone to share it with. The question was, would they remember this truth in the months to come when their dreams threatened to pull them in opposite directions? The answer lay in the future, hidden like the city beneath the fog. For now, they had their promises, their shared vision, and a love that had already proven stronger than circumstance. But as their phones continued to buzz with opportunities and obligations, both couldn't help but wonder, would that be enough? Chapter 5. Fracturing Dreams. Autumn painted San Francisco in shades of gold and crimson as the Confluence approached its grand opening. The transformed warehouse stood as a testament to Ethan and Lily's vision, a perfect fusion of technology and art that had already garnered international attention. But within its walls, subtle fault lines were beginning to appear in their once seamless partnership. The morning of the final installation review dawned clear and crisp. Lily arrived early, her boots echoing through the vast space as she walked among the interactive exhibits. Each piece represented months of collaboration between artists and engineers, bringing their shared dream to life. The central installation, a massive neural network visualization that responded to visitors' movements and emotions, cast dancing patterns of light across her face as she made notes on her tablet. Ethan was supposed to join her at 9 for their final walkthrough. At 9:30, her phone buzzed with a message: "Emergency board meeting. Potential hostile takeover threat. Can you handle the review alone? I trust your judgment completely." Lily stood in the heart of their shared dream, surrounded by the physical manifestation of their love story, and felt utterly alone. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on a simple "okay." The period at the end felt like slamming a door. The review went perfectly. Of course it did. Lily had poured her heart and soul into every detail, just as Ethan had orchestrated the technical infrastructure with his characteristic precision. But as she guided the project team through the space, she couldn't help but notice how the interactive elements seemed to reach for each other without quite connecting, like lovers separated by an invisible barrier. That evening, their penthouse felt too large, too quiet. Lily stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching fog roll in while waiting for Ethan's return. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, older somehow. The painting she'd been working on sat unfinished in her studio, its colors muted and uncertain. When Ethan finally arrived home past midnight, his face was drawn with exhaustion and worry. He found Lily in her studio, aggressively cleaning her brushes, a sure sign of distress. "I'm sorry," he began, the words feeling worn thin from overuse. "A hedge fund is trying to force their way onto our board. If they succeed, they'll push for immediate profit over innovation. Everything we've built, it could be at risk." Lily continued cleaning her brushes, her movements precise and controlled. The neural network installation kept glitching during the emotional response test. "Your team will need to recalibrate it before opening night." Her voice was professional, detached. "Lily, please." Ethan moved closer, reaching for her, but she stepped away, putting her work table between them. "This is serious. The whole future of cloud vision could be at stake." She finally looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And what about our future, Ethan? When was the last time we had dinner together? When was the last time we painted or coded just for fun? The Confluence opens in 3 days, and you've missed the last 4 reviews. I've been fighting to protect everything we've built." His voice rose with frustration. "These investors don't care about art therapy or community programs. They'll gut everything that doesn't show immediate returns." "And I've been fighting to keep our vision alive on the ground," Lily shot back. "Do you even know that we've had to redesign the children's coding space 3 times? That the community outreach program has doubled its pre-registration goals, that I've been handling contractors, artists and engineers alone while you're trapped in boardrooms?" The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, fog pressed against the windows like a physical manifestation of the barrier growing between them. Their wedding rings caught the studio's light, the color-changing metals reflecting their elevated emotions in swirling patterns. Finally, Ethan spoke softly. "Remember when we talked about letting our plans be ruined sometimes? About making space for chaos in our order?" Lily's laugh held no humor. "Chaos implies randomness, Ethan. There's nothing random about this. We're making choices every day about what matters most." She walked to her easel, unveiling a canvas she'd been working on in private moments. It showed 2 figures made of light and code, reaching for each other across a widening void. The space between them was filled with swirling symbols, meeting schedules, stock prices, artwork deadlines, all tangled together in a suffocating web. "I started this the day you missed the community program launch," she said quietly. "I kept thinking I'd find a way to paint them touching, to bridge the gap, but every time I try, it feels like a lie." Ethan stared at the painting, seeing their relationship laid bare in paint and pixel. "We can fix this," he said, but his voice held a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "After the Confluence opening, after I deal with this takeover threat, there will always be another crisis, another deadline, another threat." Lily turned away, adding fresh water to her brush cleaning jar. "We're living in the after already, Ethan. This is what we've chosen." The next few days passed in a blur of final preparations. They worked together seamlessly when others were present, their professional partnership as strong as ever. But alone, the silence between them grew heavier, filled with words they were too tired or too afraid to speak. The night before the opening, They stood together in the Confluence's main hall, surrounded by their dream-made reality. The neural network installation pulsed softly, responding to their presence with patterns that seemed almost mournful. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, watching light dance across the walls. "Everything we imagined, and more." Ethan reached for her hand, and for a moment she let him take it. Their rings glowed warmly at the contact, the embedded technology responding to their shared body heat. "We did this together," he said. "No matter what happens with cloud vision, no one can take this away from us." Lily squeezed his hand once before letting go. "But what happens next, Ethan? The London Art Therapy program wants me to oversee their launch personally. They're offering resources we could only dream of here." "London?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "For how long?" 6 months minimum. Possibly a year. She turned to face him fully. "Unless you think there's a reason I should stay." The question hung between them like smoke, heavy with meaning. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Another message from the board, no doubt. His hand twitched toward it automatically before he caught himself. "I can't just abandon cloud vision now," he said finally. "Everything we've built, all the jobs at stake. I have to see this fight through." Lily nodded, as if he'd confirmed something she'd already known. "Then I think we both have our answer." They stood in silence, surrounded by the culmination of their shared dreams, while their personal dreams began to fracture. The neural network above them shifted its patterns, responding to their emotional states with swirling colors that bled from warm to cool. As they finally turned to leave, preparing for tomorrow's grand opening, both felt the weight of unspoken words. Their love hadn't died. If anything, it burned as strongly as ever. But like the installation above them, they were two entities responding to each other across an expanding void, their patterns beautiful but increasingly disconnected. The fog outside had thickened, turning the city into a ghostly landscape of shadows and lights. As they drove home separately, Ethan to another late-night conference call, Lily to finish packing for London, the mist seemed to swallow their cars until even their tail lights disappeared from each other's view. In their penthouse, while Ethan paced the home office on his call, Lily stood in her studio, adding final touches to her painting of the separated figures. With careful strokes, she added a new element, a thin thread of light connecting them across the void, barely visible but unbroken. Whether it represented hope or memory, even she wasn't sure. The night before the Confluence's opening, as San Francisco slept beneath its blanket of fog, two people who had once crashed together like colliding stars now orbited each other like distant planets, their gravitational pull still strong, but their paths diverging. Tomorrow would bring triumph and celebration, their shared vision unveiled to the world. But as they lay awake in separate rooms, both wondered if success was worth the cost of their slowly fracturing dreams. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. The Confluence's opening night glittered with promise and pretense. San Francisco's tech elite mingled with international art world luminaries, their excited murmurs echoing through the transformed warehouse space. Interactive installations pulsed with life, responding to the emotions and movements of the gathered crowd. It should have been Ethan and Lily's crowning achievement. Instead, it felt like a beautiful requiem for their fading dreams. Lily moved through the space in a dress that seemed spun from starlight, another collaboration with her fashion student mentees. Tiny LED threads woven through the fabric responded to her heartbeat, creating subtle waves of light that rippled from her core. She played her part perfectly, explaining the artistic vision behind each installation, graciously accepting compliments and deflecting questions about her upcoming London project. Across the room, Ethan commanded his own orbit of investors and tech journalists, his bespoke suit's subtle circuit board pattern catching the light from the neural network installation above. He spoke passionately about the technological innovations they'd developed, each word carefully chosen to reassure potential investors without revealing the looming threat to CloudVision's independence. They moved like binary stars, their paths crossing occasionally throughout the evening, but never quite connecting. When they did stand together, presenting their unified vision to eager audiences, their professional chemistry remained undimmed, but those who knew them best noticed the careful distance between them, the way their hands no longer sought each other automatically, the slight delay before their shared smiles. The centerpiece installation, which they'd named Convergence, drew particular attention. It was a massive, room-spanning piece that combined Lily's artistic vision with Ethan's technological brilliance. Visitors walked through a forest of light and code, their presence triggering cascading reactions of color and sound. At its heart, two streams of light and data continuously reached for each other, almost touching before flowing apart again, an unintentional metaphor for its creator's relationship. As midnight approached, the crowd began to thin. Lily stood in a quiet corner, watching the installation's light play across her hands when an unexpected voice broke her reverie. "You know, I remember when you two first pitched this concept," said Marcus Chen, CloudVision's head of development and one of their earliest supporters. "Everyone said it was impossible, that art and technology couldn't truly merge at this scale, but you proved them wrong." Lily smiled softly, remembering those early planning sessions, the excitement in Ethan's eyes as they dreamed up increasingly ambitious ideas. "We had a lot of faith back then," she said quietly, "in the project, in each other, in the future." Marcus studied her face carefully. And now, before she could answer, a commotion near the main entrance drew their attention. A group of men in expensive suits had arrived, representatives from the hedge fund threatening CloudVision. Lily watched as Ethan's posture stiffened, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. "Excuse me," she said to Marcus, already moving toward the exit. She couldn't bear to watch another crisis pull Ethan away, couldn't stand to see their triumph transformed into yet another battlefield in the corporate war, consuming their lives. The fog outside was unusually thick, transforming the street into a dreamlike landscape. Lily walked slowly, letting the cool mist settle on her skin. Her dress's LED threads reflected off the fog, creating a personal galaxy of light around her. She made it halfway down the block before hearing familiar footsteps behind her. "Lily, wait!" Ethan's voice cut through the fog like a beacon. "Please." She turned, watching him emerge from the mist like a figure in a painting. Even now, her heart skipped at the sight of him. "Shouldn't you be inside?" she asked softly. "Your investors are waiting." "They can wait." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "I saw you leaving. I couldn't just let you walk away." "Can't you see that's exactly what we've been doing?" Lily's voice broke slightly. "Walking away from each other, one small step at a time. One missed dinner, one cancelled date, one postponed dream after another." The fog swirled between them, their breath visible in the cold night air. Above them, a massive digital billboard cut through the mist, its changing advertisements casting alternating shadows across their faces. "I'm fighting for us," Ethan insisted. "Everything I'm doing, the long hours, the battles with the board, it's all to protect what we've built together." "Are you," Lily challenged, "or are you fighting for your vision of what we should be? When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? When was the last time you really listened?" The question hung in the air between them. In the distance, a foghorn sounded, low and mournful. "I found this in your studio last week," Ethan said finally, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. It was a sketch of the Confluence's layout, dated from their early planning days. In the margins, they'd written notes to each other, little jokes, fragments of dreams, hearts drawn with mathematical precision next to swooping, artistic flourishes. "We were so sure then," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "so certain we could have it all, the success, the impact, the love. What happened to us, Lily?" She stepped closer, close enough to see the tiredness etched around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. "We grew too good at building things," she said gently. "So good that we forgot that relationships need space to breathe, to bend, to be imperfect." A message notification lit up Ethan's phone screen, another crisis demanding attention. They both stared at the glowing display, its harsh light a barrier between them. "Go," Lily whispered. "They need you." "And what about what I need?" For the first time that evening, Ethan's carefully maintained composure cracked. "What about the fact that I need you? Do you?" Lily reached out, touching his cheek softly. "Or do you need the idea of me, the artist who validates your vision, the partner who understands your drive, the wife who waits patiently while you change the world?" His phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. Lily stepped back, letting her hand fall. "London is offering me a chance to make a real difference," she said, "to expand our art therapy program to communities that desperately need it. I can't keep putting my dreams on hold while you fight battles that never end." "Then let me come with you," Ethan said suddenly. "I can work remotely, set up a London office." "No." Lily's voice was firm but gentle. "You'd resent it, just like I'm starting to resent staying. Cloud Vision needs you here. The company is your baby, your vision. I won't ask you to choose." "Because you've already chosen?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Lily's dress flickered, its LED threads responding to her accelerated heartbeat. "Because one of us has to be brave enough to admit that love isn't always enough." The fog had thickened around them, creating a private world in the middle of the city. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the opening night party continuing without them. The life they'd built together, crystallized in that building behind them, seemed suddenly as insubstantial as the mist. "I do love you," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That hasn't changed." "I know." Lily smiled through her tears. "That's what makes this so hard." She reached up, unclasping the delicate necklace she wore, a wedding gift from Ethan, containing a tiny digital display that showed their first coffee shop drawing. Placing it in his hand, she closed his fingers around it. "Keep this safe for me," she said. "Like that first napkin sketch, it belongs to a perfect moment. Let's not taint it with what comes next." Before he could respond, before her resolve could weaken, Lily turned and walked into the fog. Her dress's lights created a fading constellation of stars that Ethan watched until they disappeared completely into the mist. He stood there long after she'd gone, holding her necklace, feeling the weight of choices made and unmade. His phone continued to buzz, each notification a reminder of the life he'd chosen, the dreams he'd prioritized, the love he'd taken for granted until it slipped away like fog through his fingers. When he finally returned to the confluence, the party was ending. The neural network installation seemed to sense his emotional state, its patterns turning slow and melancholic. In the empty space, surrounded by their shared vision brought to life, Ethan realized that success tasted like ashes when there was no one to share it with. That night, their penthouse felt like a museum of memories. Each room held echoes of shared laughter, of dreams planned, of love expressed in both grand gestures and quiet moments. As Ethan walked through the silence, he noticed small signs of Lily's imminent departure, gaps in the bookshelves, empty spaces on the walls where her favorite pieces had hung. In her studio, he found one last painting, still wet. Their two light figures from before now turned away from each other, their connecting thread stretched gossamer thin, but not yet broken. Below it, she'd written in her flowing script, "Some loves are meant to change us." not keep us. The fog pressed against the windows like a sympathetic embrace as Ethan sank into a chair, finally allowing himself to feel the full weight of what they'd lost. Tomorrow, there would be more battles to fight, more crises to manage, more successes to chase. But tonight, in the quiet of their fracturing dreams, he mourned the greatest casualty of his ambition, the love that had once seemed as infinite as the stars themselves. Chapter 7. Echoes of Love. London greeted Lily with slate-grey skies and persistent rain that seemed to mirror her mood. The city's ancient stones and modern glass towers created a familiar tension between old and new, art and progress, a reminder of everything she'd left behind in San Francisco. Her temporary home, a converted Victorian warehouse in Shoreditch, became both sanctuary and studio, as she threw herself into establishing the new art therapy centre. 6 months into her London project, success bloomed like the spring flowers in Regent's Park. The British press celebrated her innovative approach to art therapy, dubbing her the digital healer, after a particularly successful program helping troubled teens express themselves through augmented reality art installations. Her work reached communities that had never had access to such resources, transforming lives one brushstroke at a time. But in quiet moments, when the London rain tapped against her windows like lonely Morse code, Lily found herself reaching for her phone, fingers hovering over Ethan's number. She'd scrolled through art blogs instead, only to find herself reading about Cloud Vision's latest innovations, searching for glimpses of him in press photos and interviews. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Ethan waged his corporate war with a determination that bordered on obsession. Cloud Vision not only survived the hostile takeover attempt, but emerged stronger, expanding into new markets with unprecedented speed. The media painted him as a tech visionary, the entrepreneur who successfully merged artificial intelligence with human creativity. Only his closest friends noticed how his smile never quite reached his eyes anymore. Their shared creation, the Confluence, continued to thrive under the management team they'd assembled. The space became a symbol of possibility, proving that art and technology could not only coexist, but enhance each other. Neither of them visited it anymore. The echoes of their dreams were too loud in those halls. One rainy Sunday afternoon in London, Lily was teaching an art therapy session for refugee children when a familiar piece of code caught her eye. One of the kids had accidentally accessed a deeper layer of the program they were using, revealing Cloud Vision's distinctive programming style. She recognized Ethan's work immediately. He was still using their art therapy protocols as the foundation for his AI's emotional recognition systems. That evening, she painted until dawn, creating a piece that showed 2 digital networks growing in parallel, reaching across space, but never connecting. She titled it Parallel Processing and refused all offers to buy it. In San Francisco, Ethan's life had become a carefully structured algorithm of work, board meetings, and public appearances. He'd moved out of their penthouse, unable to bear the emptiness of the space they'd once shared. His new apartment in a sleek high-rise offered spectacular views of the bay, but he kept the blinds drawn most of the time, preferring to work in the artificial day of screens and LED displays. The neural network installation he'd designed for the Confluence had inspired a breakthrough in emotional AI, leading to a new generation of more empathetic digital assistants. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd become better at programming machines to understand human emotions, while his own emotional life had gone into standby mode. Their friends watched from a distance, witnesses to a modern tragedy of success and sacrifice. Marcus, who'd known them since the beginning, sometimes found himself staring at the original napkin sketch from Blue Bottle Coffee, now framed in his office. The coffee stains had faded, but the hope in those simple lines remained clear. 1 year into their separation, their paths almost crossed in Tokyo. Lily was there to open another art therapy center, while Ethan was launching Cloud Vision's Asian headquarters. They stayed in hotels less than a mile apart, each aware of the other's presence through social media and mutual friends, but neither making the first move to bridge the gap. Late one night, in a moment of jet-lagged vulnerability, Ethan found himself in a tiny jazz bar in Shinjuku. The pianist was playing a piece he recognized, the same composition that had played during their first dance as husband and wife. He ordered another whiskey and pulled out his phone, opening his gallery to a folder he hadn't accessed in months. There they were, frozen in happier moments. Lily laughing in her paint-splattered overalls as she taught him to use watercolors, both of them covered in clay after a disastrous attempt at pottery. Her face illuminated by the neural network's lights during the Confluence's early testing phase. Each photo was a reminder of what they'd lost in pursuit of what they'd thought they wanted. In her Tokyo hotel room, Lily couldn't sleep. The city lights created patterns on her ceiling that reminded her of their installations, of the way technology and art had once danced together in their lives. She pulled out her tablet and began sketching, letting her stylus trace the familiar lines of Ethan's profile from memory. Their work continued to influence each other in subtle ways. Lily's art therapy programs incorporated more advanced technology, using AI to help track patients' progress and adapt to their needs. Ethan's interfaces became more intuitive, more artistic, as if trying to capture something of Lily's human touch in their digital architecture. Spring turned to summer, summer to autumn, and still they orbited each other from afar, connected by their shared vision but separated by pride, circumstance, and the weight of words left unsaid. The Confluence remained their legacy, a testament to what they could create together, but also a reminder of how easy it is to lose sight of what matters most while chasing dreams. In London, Lily's art began to attract attention from major galleries. Her new series, Digital Ghosts, explored themes of connection and disconnection in the modern age. Critics praised its emotional depth, unaware that each piece was a letter she couldn't send, a conversation she couldn't have. One particular painting dominated her studio, a massive canvas showing a city at night, its streets formed by flowing data streams, its buildings made of code and light. Hidden in the complexity were two figures, their forms suggested rather than defined, reaching toward each other across a divide of dark space and bright pixels. She worked on it obsessively, adding layers of detail that only revealed themselves when viewed from certain angles or in specific lights. In San Francisco, Ethan's dedication to his work earned him comparisons to tech legends like Jobs and Musk, but those who knew him best saw what the profiles missed. The playful spark that had once balanced his drive had dimmed. His innovation was still brilliant, but had taken on a mechanical quality, as if he were running on autopilot. He kept Lily's necklace in his desk drawer, its tiny digital display still showing their coffee shop sketch. Sometimes, during late nights at the office, he'd take it out and watch the simple animation loop. 2 coffee cups, their steam intertwining in an endless dance. The battery would die eventually, freezing that moment forever, but for now it remained active, like hope on life support. Their mutual friends learned to be careful with names and news, acting as unconscious diplomats between 2 territories of the heart. But information still filtered through. Lily's success with a groundbreaking virtual reality therapy program for PTSD patients, Ethan's revolutionary work in emotional AI, their continuing impact on their respective fields. One evening, as London's autumn painted the city in shades of gold and russet, Lily received a package from Marcus. Inside was a photo album filled with candid shots from the Confluence's opening night, moments she hadn't seen before. There she and Ethan were, caught in unguarded instances between the official photographs, sharing a private joke during the setup, hands brushing as they adjusted an installation, exchanging proud glances as their vision came to life. The last photo showed them standing beneath the neural network installation, its lights creating a galaxy around them. They weren't posed or performing for the cameras, just two people who had created something extraordinary together, their faces reflecting both triumph and an unconscious foreboding of what was to come. Lily spent the night in her studio, adding a new layer to her city painting. In the darkness between the digital streams, she added tiny points of light, like stars waiting to be connected into constellations. The picture took on a new dimension, no longer just about separation, but about the possibility of finding new patterns in old light. In his San Francisco office, Ethan was perfecting a new algorithm for CloudVision's latest project. The code was complex, beautiful in its efficiency, but something felt missing. He found himself adding small artistic elements to the user interface, subtle details that served no practical purpose, but made the whole thing feel more human, more alive. As he worked, a notification popped up on his screen. The Confluence had just won another international award for innovation in community arts and technology. The announcement included a photo of their original sketch, the one they'd made on that coffee-stained napkin so long ago. Ethan stared at the image for a long time, remembering the hope and excitement of that first meeting. The way their different perspectives had created something greater than either could have imagined alone. Success had come at a price neither had expected to pay, but the dream they'd shared was still changing lives, still bringing art and technology together in ways that mattered. The fog rolled in outside his office window, transforming the city lights into soft, glowing orbs. Somewhere across the ocean in a London studio, Lily was probably working late too, both of them creating in parallel, their work still speaking to each other, even as they remained silent. Chapter 8. Truth in Code. 2 years into their separation, fate orchestrated its first move toward reconciliation on a rain-soaked evening in Singapore. The Marina Bay Sands Hotel loomed against storm clouds, its distinctive silhouette illuminated by occasional flashes of lightning. Inside its prestigious convention center, the International Technology and Arts Summit was reaching its climax, an event that would unknowingly set in motion the unraveling of a lie that had torn two hearts apart. Marcus Chen hadn't planned to attend the summit. As CloudVision's head of development, he'd seen enough tech conferences to last a lifetime. But a last-minute cancellation had left the company needing senior representation, and Ethan was trapped in meetings with European investors. So here, Marcus stood, nursing a gin and tonic at the closing reception, when he spotted a familiar face that made his blood run cold. James Porter, former junior systems administrator at CloudVision, was holding court near the bar, clearly enjoying his new status as chief innovation officer at a rival firm. He'd left the company shortly after Ethan and Lily's separation, riding the wave of tech industry poaching that had followed CloudVision's successful defense against the hostile takeover. Something about Porter's animated gestures, the slight slur in his voice as he bragged about his career trajectory, triggered a memory in Marcus's mind, a detail that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now Marcus moved closer, pretending to be absorbed in his phone while listening to Porter's increasingly boisterous conversation. "Best career move I ever made," Porter was saying, swirling his whiskey. "Though I still feel a bit guilty about how I left CloudVision. That anonymous letter thing was pretty underhanded, but hey, corporate warfare, right? All's fair in love and startups." Marcus's hand tightened around his glass. The anonymous letter, the one that had planted the first seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind about Lily's fidelity. The catalyst that had started their spiral of miscommunication and mistrust. Meanwhile, in London's Tate Modern, Lily stood before her latest installation. a massive interactive piece that combined traditional painting with augmented reality. Visitors wearing special glasses could see layers of digital art emerging from the physical canvas, creating an experience that bridged the gap between classical and digital art forms. The piece had drawn international attention, earning her a feature in The Guardian and solidifying her reputation as a pioneer in the field. But tonight, something felt off. The usual satisfaction of a successful opening was hollow, tainted by an unexpected discovery. Earlier that day, while going through old emails for a retrospective piece on her career, she'd found something strange. Deleted messages from her old CloudVision account, recovered by the IT department for archival purposes. Messages that suggested someone had been accessing her email during those final months in San Francisco, selectively deleting correspondence and calendar entries. Back in Singapore, Marcus had managed to maneuver Porter onto the hotel's outdoor terrace. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with humidity and unspoken truths. "That letter," Marcus said carefully, setting down his drink. "The one about Lily supposedly seeing someone else. That was you." Porter laughed, too caught up in his own storytelling to notice Marcus's tension. "One of my better moments of creative writing. Had to make it convincing, you know. Used details from her deleted emails, her calendar. The timing was perfect, right when Ethan was most stressed about the takeover threat. Made him vulnerable, distracted. Made the whole hostile acquisition thing easier for our side. But it failed," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "CloudVision survived." "Yeah, but look what it cost Ethan," Porter smirked. "His marriage, his dream project at the Confluence going stagnant. Sometimes you don't have to kill a company to hurt it. You just have to wound its heart." Marcus's first instinct was to punch Porter right there, consequences be damned. Instead, he pulled out his phone and quietly pressed record, letting Porter continue his drunken confessions. Each word was another nail in the coffin of a lie that had destroyed his friend's happiness. In her London apartment later that night, Lily sat surrounded by recovered emails, piecing together a puzzle she hadn't known existed. The pattern was clear now. Someone had systematically erased evidence of her legitimate business meetings, making innocent professional connections appear suspicious. They'd deleted calendar entries for art therapy sessions, leaving unexplained gaps that could be misinterpreted as secret rendezvous. Her hands shook as she opened her laptop and began to write, "Dear Ethan, I've discovered something that—" She stopped, deleting the words. After 2 years of silence, how could an email possibly convey the weight of this revelation? In his Singapore hotel room, Marcus faced a similar dilemma. The recording on his phone contained the truth that could change everything, but it also held the power to reopen old wounds. Ethan had finally seemed to be finding his footing again, even if his smile never quite reached his eyes. Would revealing this now help or hurt? The decision was made for him when his phone buzzed with an urgent message from CloudVision's legal team. In reviewing old security logs for an unrelated case, they'd discovered evidence of systematic data manipulation from Porter's old terminal. The truth was emerging on multiple fronts, like a tide that could no longer be held back. Dawn found Ethan in his San Francisco office, staring at his computer screen in stunned silence. Marcus's message, the legal team's findings, and the recovered data all painted a picture that shattered the foundations of his past assumptions. The anonymous letter that had poisoned his trust, the suspicions that had eaten away at his marriage, all of it had been a carefully orchestrated deception. He pulled Lily's necklace from his desk drawer, its tiny display still loyally showing their coffee shop sketch. For 2 years, he'd blamed their separation on competing dreams, on ambition and circumstance. But now he faced a harder truth. They'd been victims of a deliberate attack, and his own failure to trust, to communicate, to fight harder for their love, had given that attack its power. In London, Lily's latest painting was taking shape on her largest canvas yet. It showed a complex network of interconnected nodes, some glowing with truth, others dark with deception. In the center, two data streams that had been diverted by false signals were slowly finding their way back to each other. As she worked, her phone lit up with a message from Marcus. Her breath caught as she read about Porter's confession, about the evidence being uncovered. The paintbrush trembled in her hand, dripping ultramarine tears onto the studio floor. The truth was finally emerging, but it brought with it difficult questions. Would knowing they'd been manipulated change anything? After 2 years of building separate lives, of professional success and personal growth, was there still a way back to what they'd lost? Or would this revelation simply add another layer of regret to their already complex history? In San Francisco, Ethan stood at his office window, watching the fog roll in from the bay. Somewhere in London, Lily was probably awake too. It would be afternoon there. He thought about all the moments they'd missed, all the trust they'd lost, all because he'd let an anonymous letter plant seeds of doubt that should never have taken root. He opened his laptop and began to write, then stopped. Some things couldn't be fixed with emails or text messages. Some truths needed to be spoken face to face. Some wounds needed to be healed in person. Outside his window, the fog was doing what it did best, making the familiar city look new, different, full of possibility. Perhaps that's what this truth could do for them, not erase the past 2 years, but cast them in a new light, offering a different perspective on what had been lost and what might still be found. The neural network installation at the confluence had always responded to emotion, creating patterns based on the feelings it detected in the room. Tonight, in that empty space, it pulsed with a new rhythm, as if sensing the shift in the story it had witnessed from the beginning. The light patterns no longer spoke of separation. Instead, they seemed to be weaving a new pattern, creating paths through the darkness, showing ways that broken connections might be restored. In London, Lily added one final touch to her painting, a small but crucial detail that changed the entire composition. In the space where the diverted data streams were reconnecting, she painted a tiny coffee cup, its steam rising in a familiar double helix pattern. The truth had taken 2 years to surface, emerging like a distant star whose light was only now reaching Earth. The question was, would it illuminate a path forward or simply cast new shadows on an old pain? The answer lay in what they would choose to do with this revelation, and that choice would determine whether their love story had truly ended, or was simply waiting for its next chapter to begin. Chapter 9. Fractures and Fragments. The truth hit Ethan like a tidal wave, washing away the careful structures he'd built around his heart. In the days following Marcus's revelation, he moved through San Francisco like a ghost, seeing memories in every corner of the city. The coffee shop where they'd first met now felt like a museum of lost possibilities. The confluence, their shared dream made reality, echoed with the weight of what they'd lost to a carefully crafted lie. His response to the discovery manifested in code. For 5 days straight, he locked himself in his private development lab at Cloud Vision, emerging only when his body demanded sustenance or sleep. What he created during that time would later be hailed as his masterpiece, a security algorithm that could detect patterns of deliberate deception in digital communications, identifying manipulated data trails, and reconstructing deleted information. He named it Lily's Truth. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Lily processed the revelation through art. Her London studio became a fortress of creativity as she worked on what would become her most powerful series yet. Digital Deception comprised 7 massive canvases, each one exploring a different aspect of truth and manipulation in the modern age. The centerpiece, titled Echo Chamber, showed a heart made of binary code, its pixels scattered by an unseen force, then reassembling in a new pattern. Hidden within the complex design were fragments of the anonymous letter that had started their downfall, now exposed as the lie it had always been. On a rainy Wednesday morning, Lily found herself standing before the Shard, London's tallest building, its peak lost in low-hanging clouds. She'd just finished a meeting with the Tate Modern about a permanent installation, but her mind was elsewhere. In her bag, her phone held dozens of drafted messages to Ethan, each one deleted before sending. How do you begin to rebuild something that was destroyed by a lie? How do you find the words to bridge 2 years of silence? In San Francisco, Ethan grappled with similar questions as he stood in their old penthouse for the first time since moving out. The space had been preserved like a time capsule. He'd never had the heart to sell it or change it. Lily's studio still held the ghosts of her presence. Dried paint splatters on the floor, half-empty jars of brushes, the lingering scent of linseed oil. On her easel stood the last painting she'd created here, the one showing 2 figures made of light, separated by a void of misunderstanding. He noticed now, for the first time, tiny lines of code hidden in the background. Fragments of their original Confluence programming, written in his style but painted with her touch. The revelation about Porter's manipulation had unleashed a tsunami of legal and corporate consequences. CloudVision's lawyers were building a case that would likely end in criminal charges. The tech world buzzed with scandal as more details emerged about the attempted hostile takeover and the psychological warfare that had accompanied it. But for Ethan, all of that felt peripheral to the central truth he now faced. He had let doubt poison the purest thing in his life. He had failed to trust the person who had taught him to see beauty in imperfection. In her London flat, Lily sat surrounded by recovered emails and data logs, each piece of evidence another shard of their shattered past. The technical details of the deception were clear now. The deleted meetings, the manipulated calendar entries, the carefully crafted appearances of impropriety. But the deeper wound wasn't in the digital manipulation. It was in the speed with which trust had crumbled. She found herself returning to the Confluence's website, watching videos of their interactive installations still functioning, still bringing art and technology together in the way they dreamed. The neural network at its heart continued to create patterns based on visitors' emotions. But she noticed something new. It seemed to favor configurations that showed separation followed by reunion, as if it had learned something about the nature of human connection from the thousands of people who'd passed through its space. One evening, as London's early winter darkness settled over the city, Lily received an unexpected package. Inside was a small, familiar device, her digital necklace, the one she'd given back to Ethan that fog-shrouded night. But it had been modified. The tiny display now showed not just their original coffee shop sketch, but an animation that incorporated it into something larger, a flowing pattern of code and color that transformed the simple drawing into a gateway to a virtual space. When she accessed the linked digital environment using her augmented reality glasses, she found herself in a virtual recreation of their first meeting. Coffee cups on the table, scattered portfolios on the ground, and there, floating in the digital space, was a message written in Ethan's distinctive programming style. I built walls of code to protect what we created, but I failed to protect what mattered most: our trust. The truth about Porter's deception doesn't excuse my failure to believe in us. Some bugs in the system can be fixed with a few lines of code. Others require a complete rebuild from the foundation up. If you're willing, I'd like to start that process. In San Francisco, Ethan waited. He'd poured weeks into creating that virtual space, combining CloudVision's most advanced AR technology with deeply personal touches that only Lily would understand. The coffee cups were rendered with the same slight imperfections as her original sketch. The scattered portfolio pages contained fragments of code from their shared projects, mixed with brush strokes in her style. He'd sent it without expectation of response, knowing that understanding the truth of Porter's manipulation didn't automatically heal the wounds of 2 years apart. They had both grown, changed, built separate lives. Perhaps knowing the source of their fracture would only serve as closure, a final chapter in their story. But then, on a foggy San Francisco morning, a notification appeared on his phone. A new piece had just been installed at the Confluence, approved by Lily's remote authentication. When he arrived at the space, he found the neural network installation had been modified. Now, when visitors stood in certain spots, their presence triggered the appearance of painted code, artistic elements woven seamlessly into the digital display. The code, when compiled, formed a simple message. Some masterpieces take time to create. Some truths take time to surface. Some hearts take time to heal. But time isn't the same as distance, and healing isn't the same as forgetting. Through their shared creation, they began a careful dance of digital communication. Each day, Ethan would add new elements to the virtual space he'd created, building it out with memories and possibilities. Lily would respond through the Confluence's installations, her artistic touches appearing in unexpected places within the technical framework. Their collaboration caught the attention of the art and tech worlds. Critics noted how the Confluence seemed to be evolving, becoming more integrated, more emotional in its responses. What none of them knew was that they were witnessing something intimate, two people learning to speak to each other again through the language they'd created together. Marcus watched this unfold with quiet satisfaction, remembering that first coffee shop drawing now framed in his office. The simple sketch had grown into something extraordinary, not just the Confluence itself, but the unique way Ethan and Lily communicated through their work, each piece of art or code, a message only the other could fully understand. As winter deepened in London, Lily worked on a new installation that would connect directly with the Confluence's systems. She poured everything into it, her anger at the deception that had separated them, her grief for the time lost, her hope for what might still be possible. The piece would serve as both question and answer, both ending and potential beginning. In San Francisco, Ethan prepared for the annual Technology and Arts Summit, where he would unveil Lily's truth to the world. The algorithm that had emerged from his days of coding fury had evolved into something more than just a security tool. It had become a testament to the cost of lost trust and the power of revealed truth. The fog wrapped around both cities, connecting them across the ocean like a bridge of clouds. In London, Lily put the finishing touches on her installation, her hands steady despite the weight of what she was about to share. In San Francisco, Ethan reviewed his presentation one last time, knowing that his upcoming speech would be about much more than just technology. They stood at the threshold of something new, something that could only exist because of everything they'd been through. The truth had emerged, like a flower through concrete, breaking apart the foundations of their separation. But what would grow from these cracks remained to be seen. Their love story had been manipulated by outside forces, but its core remained true. Like the neural network at the Confluence's heart, it had learned and evolved, becoming something more complex, more resilient. Now, as they began to bridge the distance between them, one piece of art and code at a time, they faced the biggest question of all. Could understanding the truth about their past help them write a new future? Chapter 10. Convergence Points. The International Technology and Arts Summit in Venice seemed designed by fate itself, a city of bridges, hosting an event that might bridge their separate worlds. The Grand Palazzo, chosen as the venue, stood proudly on the Grand Canal, its Renaissance architecture a fitting backdrop for an event celebrating the marriage of classical arts and cutting-edge technology. Ethan arrived 2 days early, ostensibly to prepare for his keynote presentation unveiling Lily's truth. In reality, he found himself wandering the labyrinthine streets of Venice, each narrow alley and ancient bridge reminding him of life's unexpected turns. The city's famous fog rolled in from the lagoon, so similar to San Francisco's that he could almost imagine he'd stepped back in time. In her hotel room overlooking the Rialto Bridge, Lily put the finishing touches on her installation. She'd chosen to debut Digital Deception here, the full series of 7 paintings, now enhanced with augmented reality elements that revealed hidden layers of truth when viewed through special glasses. The centerpiece, Echo Chamber, had evolved since its creation in London. She'd added new elements that would interact directly with Ethan's Lily's Truth algorithm during their planned joint demonstration. Neither had explicitly acknowledged that they would see each other here. Their communications had remained in the realm of art and code, messages hidden in installations and algorithms. But they'd both chosen to arrive early. Both picked hotels on the same side of the Grand Canal. Both found themselves drawn to the same quiet campos and hidden piazzas. The evening before the summit's opening, Lily stood on the Academia Bridge, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and rose, the same colors she'd used in their first collaborative piece at the confluence. Behind her, steps approached, measured, familiar steps that made her heart skip despite 2 years of careful emotional walls. "The light here?" Ethan's voice was soft, uncertain. "It reminds me of the neural network's patterns when we first activated it." Lily didn't turn around. "Golden hour in Venice. Even the most advanced algorithm would struggle to replicate it perfectly." "Some things resist digital recreation," he agreed, moving to stand beside her, careful to leave space between them, like trust, like truth. Below them, a gondola glided past, its wake creating ripples that distorted the sunset's reflection. Like their own lives, Lily thought, one action creating patterns that spread far beyond its origin point. "I read the full report," she said finally. "About Porter's manipulation, the deleted emails, the fabricated gaps in my calendar." "I should have trusted you." Ethan's voice carried years of regret. "Should have shown you the letter, talked to you instead of letting doubt take root." "We both let external forces hack our relationship." Lily turned slightly, studying his profile against the darkening sky. He looked older, more weathered, but his eyes still held that mixture of analytical precision and hidden warmth she'd first fallen for. The perfect vulnerability in our shared code. A water taxi roared past, its wake making the gondolas bob like correlation points on a scattered graph. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and unrealized possibilities. "Your algorithm," Lily broke the silence. "Why did you name it after me?" Ethan's hands gripped the bridge's railing. "Because it does what I failed to do. It seeks truth beneath surface appearances, finds patterns in seeming chaos, trusts in the integrity of core data despite external interference." "Poetic," she smiled slightly. "You've changed." 2 years of examining my biggest bug in logic will do that." He turned to face her fully now. "Lily, Not here," she cut him off, gently. "Tomorrow, we have to present our works to the world, show them how art and technology can reveal truth, can heal divisions. Let's be those people first. The other conversation, that needs its own space, its own time." He nodded, understanding. They stood in silence, watching Venice transform from golden hour to blue hour, the city's lights beginning to twinkle like stars reflected in the dark water. The next morning, the summit opened with unprecedented attendance. The art and tech worlds held their breath, aware that something unprecedented was about to unfold. The grand presentation hall of the Palazzo was packed when Ethan took the stage to introduce Lily's Truth. "2 years ago," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion beneath it, I let a carefully crafted deception destroy something precious. In response, I created this algorithm, not just to detect digital manipulation, but to understand how truth can be obscured by lies and how it fights to emerge despite our best efforts to ignore it. The demonstration was spectacular. On massive screens, they watched the algorithm uncover hidden patterns in data, reveal manipulated timestamps, reconstruct deleted information. But it was more than just a security tool. In Ethan's hands, it became a meditation on trust, truth, and redemption. As the presentation reached its climax, the screens suddenly shifted. New patterns emerged, artistic elements flowing through the code like water through Venice's canals. The audience gasped as Lily walked onto the stage, her presence unannounced, but somehow inevitable. "Technology can reveal truth," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "But art can help us understand it, feel it. Integration isn't just about systems, it's about hearts and minds working in harmony." Together, they demonstrated how Lily's truth interfaced with her digital deception series. The paintings displayed on screens around the room came alive with layers of meaning. The algorithm revealed hidden patterns in the artwork, while the artistic elements made the code's functions viscerally emotional and deeply human. The centerpiece, Echo Chamber, transformed before the audience's eyes. The scattered binary heart at its center began to reconstruct itself, but differently than before. The original anonymous letter that had torn them apart appeared in fragments, then dissolved into new patterns of connection and understanding. The demonstration ended to thunderous applause, but Ethan and Lily barely heard it. In the moments of their collaboration, something had shifted between them, like Venice's fog burning away to reveal the city anew. They managed to maintain professional composure through the following panels and discussions, but both felt the growing tension of unspoken words. Their presentations had laid bare not just their professional innovations, but their personal journey, the pain of separation, the power of revealed truth, the possibility of redemption. As evening fell, they found themselves drawn to the palazzo's rooftop terrace. Venice spread before them like a dream, its lights reflected in the countless canals, creating constellations below to match those emerging above. The summit's closing reception continued inside, but up here they finally had space for the conversation they'd been avoiding. "I've thought about this moment for 2 years," Ethan said quietly, "rehearsed what I would say if I ever got the chance. Now that it's here, none of those practiced words seem adequate." Lily moved to the terrace's edge, looking out over the city. "Then don't use words. Show me like you did today, like we've been doing through our work." Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, the original napkin sketch from Blue Bottle Coffee, preserved in a protective case. "I keep this with me always," he said, "not just as a reminder of what we lost, but of how we began, with spilled coffee and scattered papers and 2 people willing to see beauty in chaos." "And now," Lily's voice was barely a whisper, "what do you see?" "I see us like Venice itself." He moved to stand beside her, close enough to feel her presence but not touching. A city of art and engineering, of ancient wisdom and modern innovation. A place where water threatens to separate everything, but instead becomes the very thing that connects it all. Lily turned to him, tears catching the light from the palazzo's windows. "Pretty words, Mr. Drake, but can you put them into code?" A small smile tugged at his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him in 2 years. He pulled out his phone and, with a few quick taps, activated something in the Confluence's systems back in San Francisco. On both their phones, notifications appeared. The neural network installation had created a new pattern, one that combined elements from both their recent works. In the digital space, their separate creations were dancing together, creating something new and unexpected. Some bugs can't be fixed with patches, Ethan said softly. Sometimes you need to rewrite the entire program. I'd like to try that, Lily. Not to recapture what we had, but to build something new, something stronger. She took his hand, their first physical contact in 2 years. Their wedding rings, still worn though separated, caught the starlight. The tiny crystals embedded in them responded to their touch, creating patterns that matched the rhythm of their heartbeats. Venice is a city built on water and dreams, Lily said, intertwining her fingers with his. It shouldn't work, but it does. Maybe we're like that too. Impossible, but inevitable. Above them, stars emerged as Venice's evening fog cleared. Below, the city's lights danced on the water like scattered pieces of code, waiting to be assembled into something meaningful. And there on the terrace, 2 people who had lost their way found themselves writing the beginning of a new program, one that would compile heartbeats instead of binary, transform pain into pixels, and create something beautiful from the ruins of what was lost. The night was young, and Venice had countless bridges yet to cross, but for now they stood together, letting the city's ancient magic and their modern love story intertwine like art and algorithms, like truth and trust, like 2 hearts learning to beat in sync once more. Chapter 11. Rewriting the code after Venice. Nothing and everything changed. Like a complex algorithm learning from new data, Ethan and Lily began the delicate process of rebuilding their relationship, one careful interaction at a time. They chose neutral territory for their fresh start, a small Italian village on the Amalfi coast, far from the pressures of both their worlds. Positano clung to the cliffs like an artist's daydream, its pastel buildings cascading down to the Mediterranean in a riot of color that even Lily's skilled hand would struggle to capture perfectly. Here, in a villa perched between sea and sky, they began the process of rediscovery. The first morning, they sat on their terrace overlooking the water, the breakfast between them untouched as they navigated the strange, familiar unfamiliarity of their situation. 2 years had changed them both. Ethan's edges had softened, while Lily's artistic chaos had gained structure. Like their beloved San Francisco fog, the past clouded clear vision, but also softened harsh realities. "Tell me about London," Ethan said, watching her hands wrap around her coffee cup, still the same gesture after all this time, but somehow more deliberate now. "Not the professional successes. I've followed those. Tell me about the small moments, the ones that changed you." Lily studied the horizon where blue sea met bluer sky. "There was this tiny gallery in Shoreditch," she began, "run by an elderly woman who'd survived the Blitz. She taught me about resilience, about how art can rebuild what war destroys. Her stories, they helped me understand that sometimes things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger." The days unfolded like watercolors bleeding into each other. They walked the narrow streets of Positano, relearning each other's rhythms. Ethan noticed how Lily now photographed tiny details, a crack in an ancient wall, a pattern of light on stone, instead of just the grand vistas. Lily observed how Ethan paused to appreciate beauty without immediately trying to quantify or digitize it. In the evenings, they worked separately but together on their terrace. Lily set up a small travel easel, capturing the changing light on the Mediterranean. Ethan had brought only a tablet, using it to refine Lily's truth, based on what they'd learned in Venice. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, but always there was an awareness of the other's presence, like gravity, like code, running quietly in the background. One night, over local wine and fresh pasta, Lily asked the question that had burned in her mind since Venice. "When did you first suspect the letter was a lie?" Ethan twirled pasta thoughtfully around his fork. "I think part of me always knew, but admitting it meant facing my own failure, not just in believing it, but in not trusting you enough to show it to you immediately. Pride and fear are powerful debuggers of rational thought. And now? She held his gaze across the candle-lit table. What debugs your thoughts these days? Experience, he smiled softly. Loss. The understanding that the most elegant code can't compute human emotion. That sometimes the most logical action is to trust illogically. They were rewriting their story with careful deliberation, adding new elements while preserving what had made them special from the start. Their professional lives continued, both had empires to run, but they managed them differently now. Video calls were scheduled around shared meals, not through them. Work discussions were balanced with personal conversations. A week into their stay, a summer storm rolled in from the Mediterranean. They watched from their covered terrace as lightning danced across the water, nature's own neural network painting the sky. The wind carried salt spray and the scent of lemon trees, and something shifted between them. "I keep thinking about that first rainy night," Lily said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "The Vietnamese restaurant where our perfect plans got derailed, and became better for it," Ethan finished. He reached for her hand. They'd been careful with physical contact, but the storm seemed to demand connection. "Do you know what I learned in these 2 years apart? That perfection isn't in the plans. It's in the glitches, the unexpected variables, the moments when the program has to adapt." Lightning flashed, illuminating tears on Lily's cheeks. "I started painting again, truly painting in London," she confessed. "Not for galleries or exhibitions, for myself. Every piece was a conversation we couldn't have, a truth I couldn't share." "Show me," Ethan whispered. She led him to her room, where a small portfolio lay unopened. Inside were dozens of small studies, quick, emotional pieces that traced her journey through separation and revelation. Each one incorporated elements of code, digital patterns woven through organic brushstrokes. "I never stopped speaking our language," she said softly. "Even when we weren't talking, I was trying to debug my heart through art." Ethan's hand trembled as he touched one painting, a small study of their coffee shop meeting, but rendered in binary, the figures composed of ones and zeros that somehow captured the electricity of that first collision. The storm outside intensified, but they barely noticed. They sat on the floor of Lily's room, surrounded by 2 years' worth of painted emotions, and began to truly talk about the pain of separation, the anger at Porter's manipulation, the fear that had kept them from fighting harder for their love. "I built the Confluence's systems to recognize and respond to human emotion," Ethan said, examining a particularly raw piece that showed their wedding day filtered through tears. "But I failed to apply that same recognition to our relationship. I let logic override instinct. And I let pride override necessity," Lily added. "I should have demanded you show me that letter, should have fought harder to break through your walls." Lightning flashed again, and in that brilliant moment they saw each other with perfect clarity, not as they had been, but as they were now. Older, wiser, scarred, but stronger. Like Positano itself, they had weathered storms and emerged more beautiful for the wear. Their kiss, when it came, wasn't planned or perfect. Like their first meeting, it was a collision of circumstances. A shared glance, a crack of thunder, the weight of understanding tipping them toward each other. It tasted of wine and tears and possibility. Later, as the storm began to fade, they stood together on the terrace. The air was clean, renewed, the way Positano always felt after rain. Below them, lights began to twinkle on in the village, each one a pixel in their renewed story. "We should head back soon," Lily said, though her tone suggested reluctance. "The London Centre needs attention, and I'm sure Cloud Vision is missing its CEO." "Maybe," Ethan pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, different now, but still essentially Lily. Or maybe we've earned the right to let the world wait while we finish debugging our hearts." She laughed. That same genuine laugh that had first captured his heart in a San Francisco coffee shop. "Did you just turn our reconciliation into a coding metaphor?" "Old habits," he smiled against her hair. "But the principle stands. Some processes can't be rushed. Some programs need time to compile properly." They stayed another week in Positano, using the time to carefully reconstruct their foundation. They established new protocols, better communication, shared priorities, regular system checks of their emotional state. But more importantly, they remembered how to simply be together, to exist in the same space without agenda or expectation. Their last night in Italy, they sat on their terrace under a sky scattered with stars. Lily sketched while Ethan worked, but now their activities intertwined. She would pause to show him a particular effect she was trying to capture. He would share a line of code that reminded him of her brushstrokes. "We should thank Porter," Lily said suddenly, surprising them both. "Not for what he did, but for what his revelation gave us, the chance to rebuild something stronger." Ethan considered this, his fingers intertwined with hers. "Like your friend in Shoreditch said, sometimes things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger." Above them, shooting stars traced light across the dark sky like cosmic algorithms. Below, the Mediterranean whispered secrets to the ancient stones of Positano. And there on their terrace, two people who had lost and found each other again continued writing their story, one line of code, one brushstroke at a time. Chapter 12. Homecoming Algorithms. San Francisco welcomed them home with its characteristic fog, wrapping the city in a gentle embrace that seemed to whisper of new beginnings. After their Italian interlude, returning felt both familiar and strange, like running old code on new hardware, like painting on a previously used canvas. They chose to face it together, driving from the airport along the coast, instead of taking the direct route. The Pacific stretched endlessly to their left, while the city skyline rose and fell to their right. Lily's hand rested on Ethan's knee as he drove, a casual intimacy they were carefully reclaiming. "Should we go straight to the penthouse?" Ethan asked, as they approached the city proper, the Golden Gate Bridge emerging from the fog like a digital render slowly gaining resolution. Lily's answer surprised them both. "No," she said softly. "Let's go to the confluence first. That's where our story fractured. Maybe that's where it should start healing." The warehouse district had changed in the 2 years since they'd last visited together. New tech startups had moved in, bringing with them a fresh energy that complemented the artistic community's established presence. The confluence stood at the heart of it all, their shared dreams still bridging the gap between two worlds. As they approached the entrance, both hesitated. Through the windows, they could see the neural network installation pulsing gently, responding to the emotions of visitors inside. It had evolved during their absence, learning and growing like an AI, achieving consciousness. "Ready?" Ethan squeezed Lily's hand. She took a deep breath. "Ready to debug our past." The space welcomed them like a long-lost program finally finding its home server. The neural network installation recognized their presence immediately, its patterns shifting to display their original combined artwork, the very first piece they'd created together. Staff members, who hadn't been warned of their arrival, stopped and stared as the legendary founders of the space walked through hand in hand. Marcus met them by the central installation, his face breaking into a warm smile. "About time," he said simply, hugging them both. "The place has missed its heart." They spent hours reacquainting themselves with their creation. The community programs they'd established had flourished beyond their original vision. Children learned coding through art therapy, tech professionals rediscovered their creativity, and the space hummed with the energy of boundaries being dissolved. In a quiet moment, standing beneath the neural network's dancing lights, Lily turned to Ethan. "Do you remember what you said when we first activated this installation? That it was responding to more than just movement and basic emotions?" He nodded. "That it seemed to understand the complexity of human connection in ways we hadn't programmed. Look at it now." She gestured to the patterns above them, which had begun weaving their recent artwork from Venice with code from their original programming. "It's been telling our story all along, hasn't it? Even when we weren't here to see it." The decision to move back into their penthouse together wasn't made with words. As evening approached, they simply drove there, the city lights beginning to twinkle around them like stars emerging from the fog. The space had been maintained in their absence, but it felt like a museum piece, preserved but not lived in. They stood in the entrance, taking in the subtle changes 2 years had wrought. Dust motes danced in the fading sunlight, catching in the beam of light that still hit the spot where Lily's easel had once stood. "We don't have to stay here," Ethan said quietly. "We could find a new place. Start fresh." Lily walked to the windows, watching the fog curl around nearby buildings. "No," she said finally. "This space knows our story, all of it, the joy and the pain. Like the confluence, it's part of who we are. We just need to rewrite some of its code." That night, they ordered from the same Vietnamese restaurant that had sheltered them on their first rainy date. Sitting on cushions on their balcony, sharing steaming bowls of pho, they began planning their future with the same careful attention they'd once given to coding projects and art installations. "The London Centre needs ongoing supervision," Lily said, picking up a piece of lime with her chopsticks. "But I've built a strong team. I can manage most of it remotely, travel there every few months." Ethan nodded, understanding the implicit question. "CloudVision's board has been pushing for European expansion. What if we made London our second home? Split our time between there and here?" The idea took root, growing like one of Lily's organic algorithms. They could have both, the San Francisco Innovation Hub and the London art scene, their technological empire and their therapeutic mission, the fog of 2 cities that both felt like home. As midnight approached, they found themselves in Lily's old studio space. The emptiness felt like a blank canvas, waiting for new creation. Ethan watched as she opened her travel portfolio, pulling out the small studies she'd painted during their separation. "These need a home," she said, laying them out on the floor. "Not in a gallery, here, where they can remind us of what we lost and found again." Together, they began arranging the pieces, creating a constellation of their journey on the studio walls. Each painting found its place in relation to the others, telling their story in color and code, in pain and healing, in separation and reunion. When the last piece was hung, they stood back to observe the effect. The story flowed around the room, from their first meeting through their success, their fracture, their time apart, and finally their reunion. But there was a blank space left, deliberately positioned where the morning light would hit it first. "For what comes next," Lily explained, seeing Ethan's questioning look. "Because this time, we're writing our story together, with our eyes wide open." That night, they slept in their old bedroom, but everything felt new. The city's ambient sounds, the texture of their sheets, the way moonlight filtered through fog to paint patterns on their walls, all familiar elements combined in new ways, like a successfully refactored code base. Dawn found them on their rooftop garden, where they'd once exchanged vows. The space had been maintained but felt wild, organic, ready for renewal. Lily immediately began sketching plans for new installations, interactive pieces that would combine nature, art and technology in ways they hadn't imagined before. "We should restart the rooftop gatherings," she said, her hand moving quickly across her tablet, "but differently this time. Not just tech talks or art shows, true collaboration sessions. Bring the Confluence's energy home. Ethan watched her work, marveling at how she could still surprise him. "Speaking of home," he said carefully, "I've been thinking about Porter's trial." The legal proceedings against their former employee had been moving forward in their absence. Porter faced serious charges of corporate espionage and data manipulation. Lily's hand stilled on her tablet. "What about it?" "I want to thank him," Ethan said simply. "Not for what he did. That was unforgivable. But for forcing us to face our vulnerabilities, for making us rebuild our security protocols, both digital and emotional." She set down her tablet and moved to stand beside him at the garden's edge. The morning fog was beginning to lift, revealing the city below in patches, like a photograph slowly developing. "We should invite him to the confluence when it's over," she suggested. "Show him what his attempt to destroy actually created. Something stronger, more resilient, more human." They spent that first week back in a careful dance of reclamation and renovation. Each space in their home needed to be rediscovered, each routine renegotiated. They learned to share morning coffee again, to work in comfortable silence, to respect each other's newly developed habits while building fresh patterns together. The neural network at the confluence responded to their renewed presence in the city, its patterns becoming more complex, more integrated. Visitors noticed the change, commenting on how the space felt more alive, more emotionally resonant. One evening, as they sat in their newly reorganized home office, Lily looked up from her tablet to find Ethan watching her with an intense expression. "What is it?" she asked. "I'm compiling data," he said with a small smile, "adding new variables to an old equation." "And what does your analysis show?" He moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "That sometimes the most complex problems have simple solutions. That trust isn't about perfect security protocols. It's about choosing to be vulnerable together." Lily leaned down to kiss him softly. "Sounds like a solid hypothesis. Should we test it?" "For the rest of our lives," he whispered against her lips. Outside, San Francisco's fog wrapped around their building like a protective embrace, while inside, two people who had lost and found each other continued their most important project yet, the ongoing development of a love that, like their best code, their finest art, could adapt, evolve, and grow stronger through every iteration. Chapter 13. Crisis and Creation. 6 months after their return to San Francisco, life had settled into a new rhythm, like a complex harmony finding its groove. Ethan and Lily's reconciliation had sparked a renaissance at the confluence, their renewed partnership inspiring innovations that pushed the boundaries of art and technology. But fate wasn't finished testing their rebuilt foundation. The crisis began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. Lily was in her studio, working on a new series of interactive paintings for their London centre, when an urgent message from Guatemala interrupted her flow. The art therapy program she'd established there was facing an unexpected threat. Local corruption threatened to shut down their operations, putting thousands of children's welfare at risk. She found Ethan in his home office, deep in code review for CloudVision's latest neural network upgrade. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "Remember Maria?" she asked, referring to their Guatemala center's director. "She just called. The local officials are demanding impossible bribes. They're threatening to evict our kids from the facility tomorrow if we don't comply." Ethan's fingers stilled on his keyboard. 2 years ago, this kind of crisis might have pulled them in different directions. Now he simply asked, "What do we need to do?" The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. They converted their living room into a crisis command center, multiple holographic displays showing maps, legal documents, and live feeds from Guatemala. Lily coordinated with their international team, while Ethan leveraged CloudVision's considerable resources and connections. "The legal approach will take too long," Ethan said, studying the documentation. "Even with our best lawyers, the bureaucracy could drag on for months. These kids need help now." Lily paced near the windows, the fog outside matching her clouded thoughts. "We could relocate the program temporarily, but finding a suitable facility on such short notice." "Wait." Ethan's eyes lit up with that familiar spark of inspiration. "What if we don't need a physical facility? What if we could create a virtual one?" He pulled up the Confluence's original blueprints on one of the holographic displays. "Remember how we designed the space to be both physical and digital? What if we could replicate that in Guatemala, but in reverse?" Understanding dawned on Lily's face. "A virtual confluence. We could use CloudVision's new AR infrastructure to create digital art therapy spaces that could be accessed from anywhere." Their living room became a laboratory of innovation as they worked through the night. Ethan's team deployed emergency servers, while Lily's artists created virtual environments specially designed for therapeutic activities. They were building something unprecedented, a digital sanctuary that could exist beyond the reach of corrupt officials. Dawn found them still working, cups of cold coffee scattered around the room. The neural network installation at the Confluence, sensing their intense activity, had begun creating new patterns that reflected their collaborative energy. "The first virtual spaces are online," Ethan announced, his voice hoarse from hours of coordination calls. "Basic functionality is running. We can start migrating the therapy sessions within hours." Lily studied the test environment on her tablet. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The virtual space combined CloudVision's most advanced technology with artistic elements that made it feel warm, welcoming, human. "But will it be enough? These kids need more than just digital connection." "Then we'll give them more." Ethan moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "This is just the beginning. Once we prove the concept works, we could reach children everywhere." Lily finished his thought. "Places where physical facilities aren't possible, where resources are limited." They flew to Guatemala that evening, arriving just as the officials were posting eviction notices on their center's doors. What they found surprised everyone. Instead of panic, there was excitement. The children were already exploring their new virtual therapy spaces, their laughter echoing through both physical and digital realms. Maria met them with tears of joy. "It's incredible," she said, leading them through the soon-to-be emptied building. "The kids are actually more engaged in the virtual spaces. They feel safer there, more free to express themselves." They watched as a young girl used virtual paint to create a massive mural that could never have fit in the physical space. Her artwork, responding to CloudVision's emotion recognition algorithms, changed colors based on her feelings. Another child, traditionally too shy to participate in group sessions, was confidently leading others through a virtual gallery of their shared creations. "We were so focused on protecting what we had," Lily mused, watching the children work, "that we almost missed the opportunity to create something better." That night, in their hotel room overlooking Guatemala City, they began expanding their vision. The crisis had sparked something new, a way to make the Confluence's mission truly global. "We'll need to modify the core algorithms," Ethan said, sketching ideas on his tablet. "Make them more adaptable to different cultural contexts, different therapeutic needs." Lily nodded, adding her own notes. "And the artistic elements need to be customizable. What works for kids in Guatemala might not resonate with children in other parts of the world." They worked until midnight, their creative energy feeding off each other like the early days of their relationship. But this time, their vision was bigger, their purpose clearer. They weren't just building something for themselves anymore. They were creating tools of healing and connection for the world. "Remember when you said some bugs require a complete program rewrite?" Lily asked, finally setting aside her tablet. Maybe this crisis was exactly that. A chance to rewrite not just our story, but the whole concept of art therapy and technological access. Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "We've always been best at innovation under pressure, like that first rainy night when our perfect plans got derailed." "And became something better," she finished, turning to face him. "You know what this means, though? We'll need to split our time between even more locations, San Francisco, London, and now Guatemala. Then we'll make it work," he said simply. "We're better at balance now, better at knowing what matters most." Over the next few days, they worked with their teams to stabilize and expand the virtual therapy program. The corrupt officials, faced with international attention and the program's ability to continue without physical premises, backed down. But by then, the transformation was already underway. The Confluence's mission was evolving, growing beyond its physical walls in San Francisco. The virtual spaces they'd created in Crisis were becoming a new kind of confluence. Places where technology and art could heal and connect people regardless of physical location. One evening, as they walked through Guatemala City's historic center, Lily stopped suddenly. "We need to document this," she said. "Not just the technical specs and program data, but the story, the human element." "Another painting series?" Ethan asked, already imagining how they could integrate it with their systems. "Something more," she replied, her eyes alight with inspiration. "A living document, part art, part code, part narrative. Something that can grow and evolve with each new location we reach, each new child we help." They found a quiet cafe and began planning. Their laptops opened side by side. They designed a new kind of installation, one that would track and visualize their global impact, showing the connections being forged across cultures and continents. "It's like we've upgraded our own story," Ethan observed, watching their ideas take shape on screen, taken what we learned about love and trust and transformed it into something universal. Lily reached across the table to take his hand. "And this is just the beginning. Every crisis, every challenge, they're all just opportunities to rewrite our code, to create something more beautiful than before." As night fell over Guatemala City, they walked back to their hotel, discussing plans for the future. The stars above seemed brighter here, unwashed by city lights, each one a potential connection point in their growing network of art and healing. Their love had evolved too, becoming something more robust, more purposeful. Like the neural network at the Confluence's heart, it had learned from experience, adapted to challenges, and emerged stronger. Now it was helping others do the same, turning personal growth into global impact. Back in their hotel room, Lily added one final touch to her sketches for the new installation. In the center of the design, nearly hidden among the swirling patterns of global connection, she drew 2 coffee cups with intertwined steam, their original symbol of serendipity and possibility. "For remembrance," Ethan asked, watching her work. "For inspiration," she corrected, "to remind us that the biggest innovations often start with life's little crashes and spills. That perfect plans are meant to be derailed." Outside their window, Guatemala City sparkled like an earthbound constellation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to expand their vision. But for now, they had this moment. 2 people who had lost and found each other, now using their rekindled love to light the way for others. Chapter 14. The Perfect Loop. 10 years after their first collision, Ethan and Lily stood hand in hand outside Blue Bottle Coffee. San Francisco's familiar fog wrapped around them like a welcome home embrace, while inside, their closest friends waited to celebrate not just their anniversary, but new beginnings. Remember that first morning? Lily asked, her free hand resting on her growing belly, when you were too busy with your phone to watch where you were going? Ethan smiled, touching the digital frame in his hands, the one containing their original coffee shop sketch, now enhanced with a decade of memories. Best mistake I ever made. Inside, the Confluence's neural network installation painted the air with patterns of light as they shared their news. The Infinite Confluence had gone global, bringing their vision of art therapy and technological innovation to communities worldwide. Their new project, the Nexus, would transform their old penthouse into a living bridge between all their worlds, a place where their child would grow up understanding that art and technology, logic and emotion, were all pieces of the same human story. As morning light filtered through the fog, Ethan activated the digital frame. Their simple coffee cup sketch transformed into an infinity symbol made of intertwined art and code, while beneath it, words dance between digital precision and artistic flow. Some bugs require a complete rewrite. Some hearts need the same. Debug with love. Their wedding rings glowed softly in response to their proximity, technology as attuned to their connection as their own hearts. Outside, the city hummed with endless possibility. Inside, in a coffee shop that had become sacred ground, two people who had crashed into love, lost it, and found it again, stood at the beginning of their next great adventure. Their story continuing to iterate, to evolve, to create new patterns in an ever-expanding confluence of hearts and minds.